Have you ever wondered how far someone can go when they carry anger, abandonment, and resentment from an early age? Niragi is not a hero, not someone you would want as a friend, and yet he is impossible to ignore. He explodes, manipulates, and teaches with every brutal gesture a cruel lesson about survival and human instinct. It seems paradoxical, but the more dangerous he is to others, the more we understand his mind and his traumas. In this video, we are going to dive into Niragi's psyche and discover why he acts this way, what choices define him, and how his experiences shaped every extreme decision he makes. Get ready to see the darkest side of survival and maybe see parts of ourselves reflected in that chaos. If you are a fan of movies, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any video. Where in the world are you watching this video from right now? Leave your answer in the comments. Niragi is the kind of character you can spot from afar, unpredictable, explosive, and dangerous. From the very first moment he appears, he gives off an aura of tension that makes no one feel comfortable. He is not someone you would call good or trustworthy. But what makes him fascinating is precisely that unpredictability, that sense that any of his actions could explode into immediate consequences. Looking at him, you feel you are facing someone who lives by instinct but also hides deeper, darker layers. Right away, Niragi's behavior makes it clear that he doesn't follow social rules or moral principles. He acts first, thinks later, and that creates a direct impact on everyone around him. But this apparent brutality doesn't come from nowhere. There's something in his story, in his past, that shaped this aggressive way of dealing with the world. Every gesture, every look is charged with tension, as if the universe had taught him that only the strong survive and that kindness is synonymous with weakness. Niragi stands out not only for his physical strength, but also for how he manipulates situations and people. He doesn't seek friendship or approval, only advantage and survival. This creates an emotional distance that is almost impossible to overcome. At the same time, that coldness has a purpose. To protect himself from vulnerabilities he has learned to see as fatal. He knows that any bond can be used against him, and that's why he prefers to walk alone, even if that constantly puts him in conflict with others. His presence in every game is not only strategic, but also symbolic. Niragi represents that part of us that, when pressured, decides to break limits and bend rules without hesitation. He is the mirror of impatience, resentment, and accumulated frustration. When we see him act, we feel a mix of fear and fascination, because we know there are no filters or excuses. Everything is raw, direct, and brutal. That makes him memorable and, at the same time, impossible to ignore. An interesting detail is how Niragi differs from the other characters through the emotional intensity he carries. He doesn't need to explain his actions. They speak for themselves. That intensity creates a dangerous magnetism. Even those who fear him end up watching every move with almost hypnotic attention. Niragi is proof that strength doesn't have to come from beautiful words or heroism. Sometimes it manifests through chaos, fear, and the almost instinctive determination to survive. When we study Niragi, we also notice the complexity of his mind. Even though he doesn't seem like someone who cares about self-reflection, there's a strategic intelligence behind his aggression, a reading of his environment and of people that few possess. It's as if he had trained brutality as a survival tool, learning to use fear and violence to his advantage. That shows us that not all strength comes from muscle. Some come from the mind, from an acute perception of the world. And even with all that power and presence, Niragi is neither hero nor victim. He is an unpredictable element of the narrative. This makes us reflect on how some people deal with trauma and frustration by turning them into brute strength. He is the personification of the law of the strongest, but also of the price of carrying anger and resentment within. Every action, every burst of fury is an expression of someone who learned that life only respects those who demand respect first. Observing Niragi, we may even feel a strange kind of empathy, but it's cautious empathy, because he is not trustworthy. He challenges us to understand the mind of someone who chose aggression as a defense, but also reminds us that there are limits that, once crossed, reveal someone's true nature. And it's precisely that nature, intense, unpredictable, and dangerous, that makes us want to understand what drives them. And that's where we start diving into the traumas that shaped Niragi. Niragi didn't become explosive overnight. Behind the violence lies a history of rejection and abandonment. He grew up in environments where strength was measured by one's ability to impose oneself and vulnerability was punished. Every humiliation, every punch or rejection he endured was like a brick building the wall that now protects his mind. He learned early that kindness was a luxury for those who didn't need to survive. One of Niragi's most evident traumas is linked to his inability to trust others. Past experiences taught him that any display of friendship or weakness could be exploited. That's why he closed himself off emotionally, becoming unpredictable and often cruel. This trauma shaped his aggressive behavior. Striking first before being struck is more than strategy, it's survival. Beyond distrust, Niragi carries a constant sense of injustice. He saw people who didn't deserve it succeed, while he was constantly crushed by the system or by authority figures. This cultivated resentment that manifests as near-constant anger. Every outburst, every unexpected attack is a release valve for a frustration that has long been building. Niragi's violence is also an expression of loneliness. It's not just anger or resentment, it's the cry of someone who never felt like they belonged. He avoids connections because, to him, any bond is a risk, a potential disappointment. This trauma shapes cold, calculated decisions. There's no space for sentimentality, only for survival and dominance. An interesting aspect is how Niragi internalizes others' suffering in a distorted way. He doesn't act out of empathy, but out of comparison. If they can hurt, I can hurt even more. That view reinforces his relentless behavior, creating a cycle of violence that's hard to break. Every action, no matter how extreme it seems, is an adaptation to his perception of a hostile world. Niragi also faces an internal conflict between anger and the need for control. He feels that his physical and strategic strength is the only way to impose some order on his chaotic life. That trauma of initial helplessness, moments when he couldn't protect himself or those he loved, turns into a need to dominate any situation. It's the demonstration of power as a response to past vulnerability. Another point is Niragi's difficulty dealing with authority. He reacts badly to any figure trying to impose rules or limits, and that comes from experiences where such figures failed or betrayed his trust. This trauma makes him rebellious and dangerous because any form of external control is perceived as a threat to his survival. Aggression, in this case, is armor. Seeing all of this, we understand that Niragi's story is not one of heroism or redemption, but of brutal adaptation to deep trauma. Every decision he makes, every outburst of anger, every calculated attack is born from painful experiences no one should face alone. And it's precisely that complexity that makes us want to keep exploring how those traumas will shape his choices moving forward. That's where we start entering topic 3, each trauma and its influence on Niragi's personality. Each of Niragi's traumas leaves marks that directly reflect on his personality. His constant anger, for instance, isn't just a momentary outburst, it's a defense mechanism, a way to ensure no one ever underestimates or hurts him again. He learns quickly that hesitation is dangerous, so he acts before even thinking of the consequences. This pattern makes him unpredictable, which can be both an advantage and a warning to those around him. Distrust shapes his choices regarding alliances. Niragi rarely joins someone out of loyalty or friendship. He calculates risk and reward at every step. That makes his relationships shallow and unstable, but also efficient. He understands that, in the world he lives in, blind trust is a sentence of vulnerability, and for Niragi, vulnerability means failure. His ongoing resentment toward past injustices transforms the way he faces challenges. Every confrontation is more than physical. It's an opportunity to reaffirm that he will not be defeated again. This need for revenge shapes risky choices, but also shows fierce control over his impulses because he's learned that. To survive, attacks must be precise, not just violent. The loneliness he carries directly impacts his ability to form bonds. Niragi protects himself by avoiding intimacy, keeping everyone at a distance. It might seem isolating, but it also makes him hard to predict or manipulate. Loneliness, in this case, is both a shield and a sword. It protects his mind but reinforces emotional disconnection, making every interaction with him tense. Internalizing others' suffering distorts his morality. He doesn't act out of empathy but comparison and survival. That perspective turns him into someone who acts by his own code, often cruel but coherent within his worldview. Every choice is rationalized as necessity, not gratuitous evil, even if the result seems cold or brutal to outsiders. The need for control, born from past helplessness, makes Niragi someone who constantly seeks to impose his will. He doesn't tolerate surprises or others' failures because they remind him of the times he was vulnerable. That trauma turns every decision into a matter of strategy and dominance, reinforcing his survival instinct and aggressiveness. He is not good, but he is efficient, and that's terrifying. His resistance to authority figures also leads to risky choices. Niragi reacts aggressively to any attempt at domination, even when it harms him. This pattern reveals how old traumas shape his perception of power and threat. He's learned that blind obedience or submission can mean losing control, so he prefers to act outside the rules, reinforcing his unpredictable and dangerous side. In the end, the combination of all these traumas creates a complete Niragi: unpredictable, calculating, aggressive, and utterly distrustful. Every outburst, every strategic decision, every attack is the result of a painful past that allows no weakness, and it's precisely that complexity that makes him more than just the villain. He's a study of how deep trauma can transform a person, and it naturally leads us to the next step, exploring how these factors shape his actions within Alice in Borderland. Within Alice in Borderland. Every action Niragi takes is a direct reflection of his traumas and past experiences. He doesn't take risks for morality, friendship, or honor. He acts out of strategy, instinct, and survival. That stance makes him a feared figure among others because no one can predict whether he will attack, negotiate, or simply ignore conventions. Niragi turns his painful experiences into sharp weapons. His constant distrust shows in every interaction. He observes allies and enemies with the same calculating gaze, analyzing every move before deciding to act. That stance makes him nearly impossible to manipulate. In the unpredictable world of Borderland, that ability is vital, and Niragi uses it to ensure he's always one step ahead, even if it means acting cruelly. The anger and resentment he carries shape his approach to confrontations. Niragi doesn't hesitate to be aggressive, often creating chaos around him, because he has learned that strength is a language everyone understands. He doesn't seek justice, he seeks survival and superiority. Every attack is both a manifestation of inner pain and a tool to control his environment. The loneliness and fear of vulnerability make him avoid emotional bonds. He doesn't form real friendships or get attached to companions because any connection can be exploited. That distance keeps his mind sharp but also reinforces his image of instability and danger. It's as if isolation were the armor protecting him from disappointment or future betrayal. Internalizing others' suffering makes him calculating and ruthless. He observes others' fears and weaknesses and uses them to his advantage. That's not gratuitous evil, it's adaptation. Niragi understands that the world of Borderland rewards those who can read human behavior and act with precision, and he uses every past trauma as a lens to interpret his opponent's next move. His need for control reflects in his quick, precise decision-making. He leaves no room for error, improvises when necessary, and imposes his will with brute force or strategy depending on the moment. Every gesture shows that Niragi has learned to turn vulnerability into power, becoming an unpredictable element that changes the outcome of any situation, often with drastic consequences. His resistance to authority and external rules also shapes his actions. He acts outside conventions, ignores orders, and chooses paths that reinforce his sense of dominance. That unpredictable stance keeps other characters constantly on edge and creates tension in every scene he appears in. He is not someone you can trust, but his presence is fascinating because it shows how the survival instinct can manifest in a brutal and calculated way. In the end, every action Niragi takes within Alice in Borderland is an extension of his story and traumas. He is neither good nor heroic. He is realistic and cruel, adapted to a world where only the strongest survive. That complexity grips us because every decision reveals layers of pain, intelligence, and instinct. And as we analyze his path, we realize we are about to enter Topic 5, the dark side of Niragi and his morally questionable choices. The dark side of Niragi and his morally questionable choices. Niragi is not someone we can call good, and that's evident in every action he takes. He exploits others' fears, manipulates situations, and doesn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who poses a threat. But those choices don't come from nowhere. They are reflections of a painful past and deep traumas that taught him weakness is fatal. Every dark act, though cruel, is also a survival strategy. His ruthlessness shows in how he treats allies and enemies. He sees no one as untouchable. Everyone is a piece on the board he tries to control. That approach may seem brutal, but it expresses a sharp instinct that has learned any distraction can cost a life. Niragi doesn't feel guilt, only the need to maintain his position of power at all costs. Manipulation is another dark facet of Niragi. He observes, spots weaknesses, and uses that information without hesitation. There's no gratuitous malice, only calculation and survival. That attitude generates tension and fear around him, making every scene he appears in unpredictable. He has become a master of creating chaos without being defeated, and that's part of what makes him such a fascinating character. The accumulated anger and resentment turn him into someone who reacts with almost instinctive violence. He doesn't measure moral consequences. What matters is ensuring he survives and commands respect. It's a demonstration of how trauma can distort perceptions of right and wrong, turning protective strategies into acts of cruelty that both impress and terrify. Niragi also crosses ethical boundaries when necessary. He decides who lives and who dies, manipulates situations for his benefit, and ignores moral codes most would follow. That's not just physical aggression, it's the expression of a mind shaped by trauma, where survival overrides any ethical consideration. He reminds us that not all survivors are heroes. Some are simply efficient. His moral unpredictability generates constant tension. No one knows if he will act with strategic calculation or pure fury, and this uncertainty increases the danger he represents. Niragi has become an expert at using his dark side as a weapon, imposing fear and control. Every movement he makes is a silent message. That weakness will not be tolerated, and any mistake will be exploited without remorse. This dark facet also allows us to understand that he is not seeking redemption. Niragi does not want to be accepted or admired. He wants survival and power. His choices, as cruel as they may seem, are consistent within his logic of self-preservation and domination of any situation. This behavior challenges us to think about morality and the limits of human instinct. By observing Niragi's dark side, we understand that he is a study of adaptation to trauma, violence, and the survival instinct. He is not a villain out of whim, but out of necessity, shaped by experiences that anyone would find unbearable. And it is this complexity that naturally leads us to topic 6, how Niragi challenges and impacts other characters. How Niragi challenges and impacts other characters. Niragi's presence is a constant tension for everyone around him. He not only poses a physical threat, but also challenges others psychologically and emotionally. Even allies remain on alert because they never know if he will cooperate, manipulate, or attack. This impact creates a unique dynamic in Borderland, where every interaction with him is filled with uncertainty. Niragi provokes reactions that reveal the true nature of other characters. His aggression and unpredictability cause the most confident to show fear or vulnerability, while the cautious ones quickly learn to protect themselves. He works as a catalyst, exposing the fears and limits of everyone around him, without caring about their reactions. He also creates rivalries that drive the narrative. Each confrontation with other players becomes not only a physical battle but a mental one, where strategy and instinct blend together. Niragi knows how to exploit weaknesses, provoke emotional responses, and force difficult decisions. His presence turns seemingly simple situations into highly dangerous survival games. At the same time, Niragi defies expectations. Characters who think they know him quickly realize there is no pattern to his actions. This unpredictability forces everyone to rethink strategies and question their own choices. He is not just a danger, he is a constant reminder that the world of Borderland demands maximum attention and continuous adaptation. His psychological influence is as powerful as his physical strength. He instills fear, tension, and respect simultaneously, making every decision of others impacted by what he might do next. Niragi does not need to interact directly to have an effect. His mere presence alters behaviors and creates a constant sense of alertness. For allies, Niragi represents a paradox, someone who can be useful, yet unpredictable and dangerous. They quickly learn that relying too much on him is risky. This impact reinforces the silent lesson. Niragi conveys that trust is a double-edged weapon and weakness will be exploited without mercy. He also provokes reflection in both viewers and other characters about morality and survival. Watching Niragi act makes it clear that survival strategies are not always good or fair. He challenges ideas of right and wrong within Borderland, reminding us that in extreme situations, instinct and adaptation can outweigh ethics and compassion. By observing how Niragi impacts everyone around him, we understand that he is not just a player, he is an agent of chaos that shapes the group dynamic. His presence forces decisions, creates tension, and exposes vulnerabilities. Setting the stage for the next topic, Topic 7. The consequences of his choices for himself and others. The consequences of his choices for himself and others. Every decision Niragi makes has both immediate and lasting effects, not only for himself, but for everyone around him. His aggression and unpredictability create cycles of tension where even allies feel the weight of his actions. He learns, often the hard way, that acting without moral thought may bring momentary survival but also unexpected and painful consequences. His choices affect trust within the group. Characters close to him remain in constant alert, hesitant to open up or fully collaborate. The fear of being manipulated or betrayed by him becomes a shadow accompanying every decision. Niragi, whether consciously or not, shapes everyone's behavior and strategy, reinforcing his position of influence even without wanting to be a leader. For himself, the consequence is twofold: guaranteed survival, but emotional isolation. Each aggressive action maintains his strategic advantage but deepens his loneliness, and reinforces the wall he built against relationships. Niragi pays a high psychological price where power and control coexist with isolation and permanent distrust. His attacks and manipulations also create enemies that haunt him. Each extreme action generates repercussions that may turn against him at the most unexpected moment. This reinforces the constant tension in his journey, showing that even someone as calculating as Niragi is not immune to the repercussions of his ruthless choices. The consequences extend beyond the immediate group. Other characters observe, learn, and adapt to Niragi's behavior. He shapes the environment in his own way, forcing everyone to recalculate risks and strategies. Each of his moves leaves invisible marks, altering decisions and challenging the morality of those who must interact with him. He also faces internal consequences such as buried guilt or regret, even if rarely expressed. Although he never shows weakness, there are subtle signs of inner conflict, reminding us that acting cruelly leaves psychological scars. These invisible effects increase the complexity of his personality, making Niragi more human, though still dark. Reflecting on his actions, we realize that Niragi is a reminder that choices shaped by trauma have multiple effects. It is not only about immediate survival, but about lasting consequences that affect relationships, perceptions, and strategies. He shows that the price of extreme adaptation is high, and that the survival instinct can be both beneficial and destructive. Each of Niragi's consequences naturally leads us to Topic 8, the psychological legacy of Niragi within the narrative of Alice in Borderland, where we will explore how his presence and choices impact the story as a whole and leave lasting marks on the characters and the viewer. The psychological legacy of Niragi within the narrative of Alice in Borderland. Niragi leaves a deep mark on the narrative of Alice in Borderland, not only through physical strength, but through the psychological influence he exerts on everyone. He alters behaviors, provokes fear, and forces other characters to confront their own limits. His presence reminds us that not all challenges are external. Some come from dealing with unpredictable and dark personalities. His legacy is reflected in the lasting impact his actions have on both allies and rivals. Even after confrontations or interactions, the tension he creates continues to shape future decisions. He is a constant reminder that survival in the world of Borderland demands maximum attention, strategy, and awareness, and that there is no room for naivety or blind trust. Psychologically, Niragi represents the most instinctive and dark side of human survival. He shows how trauma, anger, and resentment can be turned into powerful tools, even if morally questionable. His legacy is the warning that every choice, even if necessary to survive, carries deep repercussions for one's own psyche and that of others. He also serves as a mirror for other characters. In dealing with Niragi, everyone must confront themselves. Can they trust him? Can they underestimate him? Each interaction forces growth or learning, even if painful. He is a presence that challenges, teaches, and manipulates without ever offering comfort or emotional safety. The narrative uses Niragi to explore extreme ethical and moral dilemmas. He challenges the idea of heroism and forces us to question what it truly means to survive. He is not a villain out of whim. He is a product of trauma, fear, and hard choices. And it is this complexity that makes him an unforgettable and psychologically striking character. His legacy is also evident in how the viewer perceives the world of Borderland. Niragi reminds us that in extreme environments, the line between survival instinct and cruelty is thin. He provokes reflection about our own limits and what we would be capable of doing if put to the test in extreme situations. His presence leaves subtle lessons about power, fear, and control. Niragi demonstrates that strength is not limited to the physical. Understanding human behavior, instinct, and coldness can be even more dangerous weapons. He challenges us to see chaos not only as destruction, but as strategy, intelligence, and psychological adaptation. In the end, Niragi's psychological legacy is a mix of fear, respect, and learning. He is not a hero or a moral example. He is a force of nature that makes us reflect on trauma, survival, and the human instinct. And this complexity opens the space for the next step, creating the engaging introduction of the video that captures attention, generates connection, and awakens curiosity about Niragi and his dark mind. So, what did you think of the analysis of Niragi's mind? Can you see any of his choices reflecting traumas we have experienced in some way? Or did you notice survival strategies that, as dark as they may seem, make sense within the world of Borderland? Tell me in the comments which character you want me to analyze in the next video, because we still have many complex minds to explore. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any analysis that will make you see the psychological side of the characters in a completely new way.